There's only one Thiago Motta. Never mind. If you're not into WWE, you will have no idea why I just done. But anyways, let's get into the video. Thiago Motta, it's being reported that his time at Juventus, it's come to an end, and it's come to an end in a manner, in fashion that I never ever expected. I was hands down Thiago Motta's biggest cheerleader, biggest advocate. I genuinely thought he would come to Juventus, he would revolutionize the club, he would get them playing a brand new style of football which is attractive to talents across the world. But let's just say football isn't as linear as it may sound. Thiago Motta's time at Juventus comes to an end. Now this is where in the past few days I've just been sat trying to connect the dots. It's being reported, one, Thiago Motta will still get the game against Genoa next weekend, but at the same time, after that game, he will be relieved of his duties and Igor Tudor will take over. The Croatian that represented Juventus, but a manager that's represented Galatasaray, Marseille, Lazio, Udinese, Hellas Verona. A manager that's contributed his fair share in European football. Now, I feel like I can break this video down into like so many different sections. Let's just break it down as to why, in my opinion, Motta is getting the game against Genoa. Now, the first reason, and the main reason in my opinion, is I feel like a year is split into quarters, yeah, and it's like the financial quarters. Now, I can only really apply it to the quarters in the UK, but I'm assuming it applies worldwide. Quarters. I'm looking at Juventus and I'm telling myself, after the months of January, February, March, April is the start of a new quarter. It's the start of the second and last quarter of the season. So I feel like they want to put their losses, they want to put Thiago Motta's costs into that quarter. And in order for that to happen, they need to enter the month of April. Now, do I think it's one of the smartest of moves? I feel like yes, and I feel like no. I feel like financially, in terms of balancing the books, in terms of having a sustainable financial footballing model, yes, you're planning ahead and you know, listen, a 1 week delay can probably benefit me more in the long run. But one part of me tells myself, imagine come May and the season ends, we turn around and tell one another, the reason why Juventus never got top four was a matter of 3 points. The reason why Juventus never got top four was because of 1 point. And then we rewind and we tell ourselves, Thiago Motta is a dead man walking. And you make a dead man walking manager go into a game against Genoa where it's now become public knowledge. He is not the manager for the foreseeable future of Juventus. He's got one more game. I feel like even him as a coach, he wouldn't really be able to translate his message to the players, to implement anything, to tweak anything. He knows. Win, lose or draw, this is my last game. I'm just looking at it and telling myself, imagine come May, Juventus miss out on top four because of that one game against Genoa. Imagine they lose. And come May, Juventus were 1 point away. I look at it and tell myself, I understand financially that it makes sense, but at the same time, it is a big risk because there's only 9 games to go in the Serie A. Juventus are in a position where they need to be capitalizing on the games against opposition where they should be getting 3 points. I look at the game against Genoa and I just tell myself, wouldn't you rather give a manager the luxury to have 2 weeks with the players during the international break where there's no pressure, where he's not under the spotlight, just so once the game against Genoa comes, the players, at least they're 2 weeks familiar with the manager, rather than the game against Genoa and then the next day Igor Tudor takes over and now he's got what, 4 or 5 days until the next game. Listen, there's a pro and there's a con to it. Now, it's being reported that Igor Tudor edged Roberto Mancini. Yes! Euros winner Roberto Mancini, the man that represented Inter, he represented Galatasaray, he represented Manchester City, he edged him. Why? I feel like one, Roberto Mancini, because of the man, because of what he's achieved in football, he probably wants more assurances, more guarantees. He probably wants from the jump 2-3 years. Igor Tudor, I feel like he's willing to accept a 2-3 month contract just in order to help the club, and whatever happens in the summer happens. When you look at Igor Tudor, I feel like when you look at his managerial career, he's always been like a stopgap managerial appointment. Somebody that comes in for 2-3 months, rallies the troops, gets results over the line, and then leaves. And I think Juventus financially, that makes a bit more sense. Mainly because it's a very delicate part of the season. I feel like the reason why Juventus have made this decision to part ways with Thiago Motta, I don't even think it's a rash decision, because in my opinion, this was a sacking that was coming months ago. I feel like ever since the PSV Champions League elimination, there have been cracks in that Juventus locker room, in that Juventus board. You can see players, player to manager, manager to coaching staff, they were not seeing eye to eye, and we were seeing it on the pitch week in, week out. I just feel like it's a very delicate part of the season because there's 9 games to go in this area. The teams in and around Juventus, they smell blood. They're full of fire, they're full of motivation, they're winning games. The competition is fierce. Vincenzo Italiano, Baroni, Palladino, Claudio Ranieri, what these managers are doing, everybody knows there's only one more spot up for grabs. And I feel like Juventus are looking at Motta and telling themselves, do we trust you to just rally the troops for the last 9 games? Tweak your system, tweak your formation, somehow rekindle your relationship with these players just to get Juventus Champions League football? And I feel like the answer is no. I feel like the cracks are too big to paper over, and it's probably the main reason why they relieved him of his duties. Igor Tudor, a man that's represented Juve, a man that loves Juve, that understands the black and white shirt, a man that's won with Juve, but most importantly, a man that's shown, give me a short-term contract and I will get 120% out of these players. And I'll be real, when he left Marseille, he genuinely was a fan favourite. Like that high pressing system. His team at Marseille had a higher XG. They created more big chances than anybody besides PSG. And let's be real, PSG, the Neymars, the Messis, the Mbappes, you're not going to top that. But for him to be ranked second and to get them Champions League football, it's impressive. Last year, taking over from Maurizio Sarri, getting Lazio 7th spot. If I remember correctly, I feel like they only lost like 1 or 2 games. He done well. Udinese, helping them to avoid the drop into Serie B. Listen, Hellas Verona, I feel like he was a manager that was appreciated at Hellas Verona. He's one of those managers that comes in, gets the job done, and leaves. I look at it and tell myself it's definitely an appointment which is worth the gamble. I feel like the 3-4-2-1, it will bring something different to Juventus. Like you will see players being occupied in different zones. I feel like it will be football played on the front foot. I feel like as a manager, as much as he might have like this fiery, combative personality, I feel like some of these players need that. They need somebody that can hold them accountable. They need somebody that can keep them in line. They need somebody that they can look at and tell themselves, listen, you understand what it means to represent Juve. You've been in my shoes. You've been in my boots. You've played amongst these fans. And I feel with Thiago Motta, one of the biggest criticisms I ever had of him, I'm not saying he wasn't a top player or he wasn't a well-decorated player or he was a player of poor mentality. I just feel like he didn't understand Juventus. He didn't understand the DNA. He didn't know I need to get results over the line no matter what. Igor Tudor has shown, in 2-3 months, I will help you avoid the drops. In 2-3 months, I will take you from 9th into a Europa League position. In a whole season, I will get you finishing 3rd and playing some of the best of football. It's definitely worth the gamble. I feel like financially, it makes sense. I feel like from a mentality standpoint, it makes sense. From rallying the troops standpoint, it makes sense. And I think because financially, it's the cheaper option, it puts Juventus in an amazing position going into the summer. Now, there are some reports that say if he was to get top 4, he might be rewarded with a 1-year extension. What do I make of that? Now, this is from the jump. My opinion can change in 2-3 months' time. I just feel like Igor Tudor, for me, from what I've seen of him, I watched him closely at Galatasaray because I follow the Turkish league. I watched him closely at Galatasaray, saw him at Udinese, saw him at Lazio, saw him at Marseille a decent amount of time. He is a good coach. He is a good manager. But for me, he's still one of those managers where he hasn't done enough in European football in order for me to know what bracket I put him in. Whether he's a manager that just does well with teams in the bottom half. Whether he's a manager that does well with mid-table teams. Whether he's a manager that does well for teams that compete for Europe. And whether or not he's a manager that does well in teams competing for Scudettos, competing for major honours. I feel like his managerial career, he's always been jumping ball, left, right, constantly representing new teams. And as much as he's doing well, the sample size is very small. Like I'm looking at the amount of games that he's managed. He's never ever cracked 40 games in all competitions at any team. So I do look at him and I tell myself, you still need to prove yourself more on a European level. You've now earned the opportunity to represent one of the biggest clubs in the world in a very delicate, sensitive part of the season where the objective is crystal clear. This is what Juventus want. Can you, Igor Tudor, deliver the goods? Me, personally, regardless of how well he does, I would probably part ways in the summer, mainly because there's better managers out there. There's better coaches out there. There's managers that have won, that have succeeded. And I feel like, regardless of the impact that Tudor has on this team, there are managers out there that can elevate this Juve team 50 levels higher than him. I feel like he's a manager, Igor Tudor, that needs a 2-3 year project at a mid-table team. And let's see how he can revolutionize, how he can improve this team in 2-3 years. For him to make the jump into a Juventus manager, and then after 9 games, get the permanent role for an entire season, I don't want to come across harsh, or I don't want to come across like I have something against the guy. It's just, from what I've seen of him, it's impressive, but it's not too impressive to represent a club the size of Juventus. But I genuinely would love to hear you guys' opinions in the comments. Now, if you're new, make sure to subscribe, make sure to hit the like button, make sure to let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll catch you guys on another one.